Hi, everybody. I am Dory Chattel, Executive Director of the Nonprofit Medical Education Institute, and I would like to welcome you today for our webinar on helping your patients with their travel prescriptions for home dialysis. We are fortunate to have two expert nurse speakers today. Jane Hafner will talk to us about Next Stage, and Josh Dipczynski will tell us about PD. This recorded course will be offered as a 1-credit continuing education course for $10. Please check our CE website for our CE courses. This course should be available in about a week, and our CE credits website will be in the chat, so you can scoop that up and put it somewhere useful and then check for it later. We will also send every registered attendee an email when the course is available for purchase. So if a bunch of you registered with one email, please share when you get that. Please note that you will have to take a quiz, so pay attention today and put your questions in the chat during the talks, and I will tell Jane and Josh about those as we get to the end of each of their presentations. We will answer as many questions as we can get to. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jane Hafner, who is an RN BSN. She holds a BA in psychology and a BS in nursing and has been a nephrology nurse for more than 45 years. Jane now does nephrology consulting after retiring from the Veterans Affairs and Next Stage Medical. Jane is a member of ANNA and is the health policy representative for the Heart of America ANNA chapter. And a PDF of the resources that she lists at the end of her talk will be put in the chat as a link so that you can get those resources. So I will bring up Jane's slides for her.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thanks for everybody for joining us. This is such a fun topic. It's way more fun than KT over V or calciphylaxis or something. So this has been a fun one to put together. I'm in Kansas and it is spring break this week, so it's a perfect time to talk about people traveling. So what we're going to focus on is what your role is as the nurse when a home hemodialysis patient wants to travel. Okay, so yes, home hemodialysis. People can travel on home hemodialysis. It can be done. Sometimes you'll see people shake their head. They're, oh, no, you can't do it. Yes, you can. What I want to say first is if you have patients that are dialyzing at home using a conventional machine, doing conventional treatments like 3 times a week, then when they want to travel, you just would organize it just like you would an in-center patient. If they are using a conventional machine or a next stage machine and they are doing it more than 3 times a week, again, you can still arrange it in center for when they travel. Sometimes people with next stage machines decide for whatever reason they don't want to take their equipment and they just want to go in center. The only thing I recommend there is that you have a conversation with them about their fluids and their diet restrictions that they may need to have when they're only dialyzing 3 times a week. I couldn't tell you how many times I heard the story where somebody they were used to dialyzing 4, 5, 6 times a week. They went in center for 3 times and they ended up fluid overloaded because when you're on vacation, you eat and drink more, you eat out, you get into salt. So you just want to have that conversation with those patients. But the rest of this talk though is going to be focused on next stage patients who want to take their equipment with them. Okay, next slide, please. So they can travel, right? 70% of next stage patients travel. What I did, I don't work for Next Stage anymore, but I just asked them how many travel prescriptions did they have last year, which was 2021. It was a year of a pandemic. They had more than 2,000. It was almost 3,000 travel prescriptions that came in. So I was kind of impressed by them because a lot of people, regardless of their kidney status, didn't travel in 2021. And how do these patients travel? They travel just like everyone else. They travel in their car, an RV, train, bus, plane. They can go on cruises. They go on group tours. They camp, they hike. They are in a tent with a generator. They do exactly what everybody else does when they go on vacation. Okay, I love this picture of this lady. She's at an airport somewhere with her cycler in a hard case, and she is ready to roll. Next slide, please. So what do you need to do as the nurse to be prepared? So when you're first training them, and their heads are ready to explode because of all the information they're gathering. The only thing about travel is just say, yes, you can travel, and that you need to have 60 days notice. That's really all you need to say at that point, because there's way too many other things for them to think about. So you want them to have in their idea when they're planning a trip to plan it 60 days ahead. Now, that being said, things happen, family emergencies, funerals, things like that. And Next Stage always works as hard as they can to accomplish what people need in a short time like that. But if it's a planned trip, 60 days makes it much easier. Next slide, please. So the first thing you want to do, especially if you have never done this before, when you have a patient that says, oh, I'm going to go, I want to go to Las Vegas, then I'm going to fly up to Seattle, then I want to go to the San Juan Islands for a while. This is my trip I want to do. The first thing you're going to want to do, if you're not familiar with doing this, is go to NXRX, click on the tab that says Forms, and then click on Travel Prescription. And you can either just look at it electronically or print it so that you can go through that list and see what are the things Next Stage is going to want to know about this person's trip. So that way, when you ask the patient all the information, you've got your ducks in a row and you're not getting halfway through the prescription and realizing, oh, I didn't know I needed to ask that. So I recommend you print it up if you haven't ever done this before. Okay, next slide, please. So then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to talk to the patient and you're going to complete that travel form. So you're going to need to ask, what are the travel dates? Where are they going? How many treatments do they plan to have in that location? And the real big one is special accommodations to their prescription. So is this patient going to have a different prescription when they travel than what is already listed in NXRX for their home prescription? Maybe they are a nocturnal patient at home, but when they travel, they want to be short daily. Maybe they use Pure Flow 60 liters. Well, you can't use 60 liters with bags. You can only hang 45 liters at a time. So their prescription for travel may be different based on how they want to do it. Okay, so there'll be a lot of discussion about that. Then who is the contact person at the hotel or the campsite or wherever they're going? Who's the name that these things should be delivered to? Okay, so that's your travel prescription is going to take care of the supplies they get from Next Stage. But just like the supplies they get at home, their ancillary supplies and their saline comes from whatever company you're already getting it from. So a lot of patients will take their ancillary supplies with them. They will put together baggies with an on kit and an off kit, an on kit and an off kit for however many treatments they're going to need, and always have more than enough in case something happens. The saline is the heavier thing to think about. So if they're going to be gone for a long time, to send a whole case of saline is not a problem. But if they're only going to need like 3 or 4 bags of saline, and again, you would always want to take a couple extra, they may just want to, pack those in a suitcase. And to that point, if they're flying, any suitcase that they have that is considered medical supplies, the airline cannot charge them extra for it unless it weighs more than 100 pounds. So they can put quite a bit of stuff in a suitcase because typically it's 50 pounds that we're trying to stay under. So that's just something you have to think about in terms of the saline and that sort of thing. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now that you've gotten all that information, you're going to submit that form to Next Stage, okay? You are going to submit one prescription for every stop they're going to make. So this patient that wants to go to Las Vegas and then wants to go to Seattle and then to the San Juan Islands, they may need 3 different prescriptions. Now, it could be that they've decided they want to get everything in Seattle to take to the San Juan Islands because they're going to take a ferry rather than worrying about getting the supplies delivered to the islands. Or they may want to get the supplies delivered to the islands. So that would be something that you would want to think about. And that's the sort of thing, when in doubt, call a Next Stage customer service and ask to speak to one of the travel people and explain what's happening. This person is going somewhere. You only can get there by ferry. Can we get supplies there? It's like magic, the things they can figure out. You give them the area zip code and they'll figure out how supplies can get there. Okay. Then if they're going on a cruise, you have the cabin number for the cruise, that is very, very helpful to add that. Next slide, please. Some additional things for them to think about. Now, COVID has changed so many things. So where they're going, They need to find out what's the information about COVID. Do they need to have tests? Do they need to have, they should carry a copy of their vaccination card, have a copy of their most recent labs and prescriptions and a letter from the doctor, that sort of thing. Have that in their hands at all times. Some places they're maybe going to need to do a COVID test before they can go somewhere. And those things change daily, it seems like. So they're going to want to look into all that. So for any trips out of the United States, you could call customer service and ask, does Next Stage support travel to that country? And if so, what are the additional charges and that sort of thing? So just call customer service, because what was the case last year might be different this year. It changes all the time as Next Stage expands. You want to find a local clinic for them to have as backup. It's not like you have to have a lot of arrangements made there, but if they just know where to call when they in somewhere and they realize they've forgotten something or they do need something, 99% of the time they're never going to call this clinic, but it just alleviates a lot of stress to know who to call. If they're traveling by sea, you're going to want to know where are the local hospitals at the different ports of call. Again, 99% of the time, they are not going to need to be going to a hospital at the port of call, but if they have that information, hopefully they won't need it, and that alleviates a lot of stress. I'm all about preventing and alleviating stress here. And then, like I mentioned before, just be aware of any COVID guidelines because they're changing all the time. Next slide, please. So here are some helpful hints to give to your patient. I really, really recommend this. If they have not traveled at all, or if they haven't traveled in a while, I recommend they do a trial run. If they can go to a friend's house or go to a family member's house, local, or if they can't do that, just go into a different room in their own house. Take the cycler, move and do it in another place, because just being out of where you're used to, where you can reach for things, can make a big difference, and it will help them figure out what do they need. If they haven't used bags since training, I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen things on Facebook where patients are, oh my gosh, I'm traveling and what I don't remember, what do I do with these lines that have the green clamps on them? It's like, oh my gosh. So do a run through of that. Use the bags for a treatment. Then, because one thing they tend to forget a lot is the power cord for the warmer. That way they will remember, I've got to have that power cord. And also, if you are going to change their prescription for travel, have a dry run with the change in the system settings so that you're comfortable that that is how the treatment turns out the way you want it to before they're in a hotel somewhere. Okay. So for airline travel and cruises, they're going to want a hard travel case. There are two different cases. One is a soft case that's fine for if you're putting it in your cycler in the RV or in your car. It has a handle, it's got wheels on it. But that will not protect it on an airplane or a cruise. So here's a picture of a well-loved, well-traveled hard case. And this is what they're going to need for that. So this kind of varies from place to place. Some clinics have a hard case to kind of check out to different patients. Sometimes maybe there's one case between a couple of clinics. It just kind of varies. You'll just have to see how that is in your area. Some patients like to have their own case because they're going to travel a lot. Maybe they travel for their job and they don't want to have to hope with their fingers crossed that that case is available. If that's the case, you call customer service and ask what the price would be, because the price will vary depending on the contract your company has with Next Stage. Then the patient can pay Next Stage, and Next Stage will send them and they'll have their own hard case. Okay. Now, just right here, I'm going to tell you, everybody will ask, why doesn't this hard case have wheels? It would be a lot easier if it had wheels like the soft case. And the reason being is it would make it weigh more than 100 pounds, and then it would no longer be free on an airline. And believe me, the engineers have worked over and over. They have looked at it from every direction to try to figure out how to do that. And they just can't do it without sacrificing some of the safety and protection that it has for the cycler right now. Now, this shows it on a cart at the airport. There also in your list of resources is going to be a cart called a Magna cart. That's the one thing that Next Stage has verified that it will work for the cycler, and so it's an okay cart to use when transporting the hard case. And when I looked it up on Amazon today, it's 17% off. So anyway, so another thing I recommend is direct flights when at all possible. The less you have to worry about if everything got moved from one plane to another, just makes life a little bit easier. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So you want to have them travel with a copy of the Department of Transportation guidelines. And that is in your list of resources that she mentioned earlier. Honestly, I do not hear of people having problems at the airports anymore. 15 years ago, it was an issue because it wasn't so common. I really don't hear of people having much problem or arguments with people at the airports. I do recommend that whatever airline they're traveling with, whatever hotel, campground, or whatever, always have a contact number of the person that is going to be there. You want to have, I mentioned before, a doctor's letter and your prescription, have that in their hands. Don't check that. Arrive early. The airports now are, everybody is short staffed. Everywhere you go, it's short staffed. So be sure you arrive plenty early and bring cash to tip. You want to tip the sky cap. You're going to want to tip anybody at the hotel that's helping you with all these boxes and heavy things. So I just would plan on having some cash for tips. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's what you want to do is when the supplies are being delivered to the cruise ship or to a hotel or a campground, have it arrive a couple of days before the patient needs to be there. Several years ago, someone recommended that they always have them take a picture of the supplies and text them that picture. So that helps you on a lot of different levels. One, you can look and see what supplies arrived. And if you see that there's something missing, you can contact Next Stage. The other thing is if you get to the front desk and the front desk doesn't have a clue about these things that are in the storeroom, you've got a picture that shows, yes, it's here, I know it's here. And you want to ask about, is there an extra fee for this? Or like at a campground, is there a fee to store this stuff for a couple of days before you arrive? You always want to have some extra supplies because stuff happens. So, you don't want to have just exactly the amount of supplies for however many treatments. You want enough for maybe 2 more treatments just in case. You also might want to recommend travel insurance just to be on the safe side with things. Another thing that if the patient, you want to talk about to the patient, if they're going to take their Next to Me, if they use Next to Me, they can take it. They don't even have to have internet in order to use it. And if they have a question about what all do they have to take, what piece of the modem and that sort of thing, they can call tech support and tech support would help them with that. But you don't need internet to use it. It's just you need internet for those treatments to come to you. So they may have a buildup of several treatments. Once they get to somewhere with the internet, it can shoot to you. If they don't want to take the iPad, then you want to review with them how to do a paper flow sheet. And maybe they've never done that before. So you might just want to discuss that with them. Okay. So we talked about, so in the hotel room, there's a few things I recommend. Some people will use the ironing board to set up supplies. You can use the hard case to put the cycler on, or you can use a nightstand or an end table. You might need to use more than one waistline in order to get from wherever the machine is to the restroom, and that's okay. You can hook more than one waistline up to do that. You might want to take a couple of big trash bags just to consolidate your trash and some little something for a sharps container. And it's also not a bad idea to ask for an accessible hotel room because they just are bigger. They have more room and you will have more room than for boxes and that sort of thing. Okay, next slide, please. So here are your travel resources that she mentioned earlier, and you will have copies of all this. So you can download all of this. The first thing is, and honestly, if you don't get anything more out of what I've discussed today, the first one is to call Next Stage when you have a question. If you have any question at all, like I just mentioned about trying to get to an island, just call. You might think, oh no, that'll be impossible. They're not going to put supplies on a ferry or whatever. Call the customer service people. There are people that their job is to help patients travel. This is what they do, and they know all the secrets out there. And just call them. Just don't hesitate. Don't even worry about it. Just call them. Same with tech support. When in doubt, call tech support. So that's the number one. If you don't get anything else out of my talk today, it's just call the experts when you have a question. The next one is traveling with Next Stage. This is a really good webinar for your patients to listen to with more helpful hints about travel. Then the next one is the DOT, or the Department of Transportation Guidance on the Transport of Portable Dialysis Machines by Travelers with Disabilities. it is a good idea to print this off and have it in your hot little hands just in case something comes up and there's any discussion or debate anywhere. Even though I said, like, really, you don't hear of it too much anymore. Then the next one is the Department of Transportation hotline number. Have that available just in case. Like I said, it doesn't happen, but if you have it, you're probably not going to need it. Okay, next slide, please. Here's another good site with tips for travel, the first one there. Then the next one, flying with a PD cycler or a next stage system one. Again, good information. There are so many resources out there for you. Now here's the Magna cart. This is the one I just told you. This is the cart that Next Stage has verified is safe to use with the heart case, the heart travel case. Then Travel with Vanessa on Facebook. Vanessa is a wealth of information on travel. She's the one that years ago gave me the idea about taking the picture of the boxes when they arrive at the hotel, and I just think it was brilliant. Then Vanessa also has a podcast, so both of these are great resources. And again, the other thing is, if a patient hasn't traveled and they're hesitant, they have questions, call Next Stage. The patient advocates who travel are happy to talk to them. This is what they want to do. They want to share their story. They want to help other people alleviate some problems that maybe they've learned along the way to how to solve. So don't hesitate to have your patient call and ask to speak to one of them. Next slide, please. Here's a podcast. Have Dialysis Machine Will Travel. Another excellent source of information. The next one is the Nexpeditions Travel Guide. Now this is an electronic version of this, but I'm going to hold this up here and see if you can see it. All of you have these in your clinic. This is a hard copy of it. If it doesn't look familiar, you've got it on the shelf somewhere. I love this. You open it up and there's different little tabs in here. There'll be one, this one has a cruise ship on it. You pull out this card, it has all the information you need on traveling with Next Stage on a cruise ship. You pull up the one with an airplane, the same thing. This is a wealth of information. If you don't have these for your patients, ask your Next Stage account manager or your Next Stage clinical consultant, and they will order them for you. But you also can have an electronic version of it with this site too. And then Home Dialysis Community by Next Stage, another good site. Next slide, please. And that's it. I say you enjoy helping your patient travel, and I hope that they all enjoy their travels.
Thank you so much, Jane. That was terrific. We did have what I thought was a very interesting question about the weight restriction for airplanes. So we know that the cycler in the hard case can't go over 100 pounds. What about other supplies? Can they have boxes of fluid that, in addition to the hard case? Because you got to have some of that with you. Do you know what the restrictions are?
It's still 100 pounds. It's
so does that
anything that's considered a medical device or medical supplies? And that's another thing that actually, and I don't have one to show you, but Next Stage has these red stickers that you can get and put those all over the boxes and things so that it's obvious that it's medical supply, but it has to be less than 100 pounds. So if you have a suitcase full of them that you want to, and you're considering that your medical supplies, and you put stickers on it, that suitcase will have to weigh less than 100 pounds.
Okay, but so you can bring the cycler in its hard case, which is 100 pounds, and then you can also bring a suitcase full of bags that weighs under 100 pounds. Are there any limits on
there's
how
no
many
limit.
100
There's no
pounds
limit
you
to how
get?
many, as long as it's medical supplies.
Okay, so it sounds like you could at least get 2. I'm not sure if there are more than that. What happens if somebody can't afford a hard case by themselves? What sorts of solutions have you been seeing for getting to use one?
The other thing, actually, I forgot to mention this, is if the clinic doesn't have a hard case and the patient can't afford a hard case, but the clinic really probably should be figuring out a way to get the hard case, to tell you the truth. But you also can use a cycler box. Most clinics don't have room to store empty cycler boxes, but you can contact Next Stage, and for a minimal fee, and I don't know how much it is now, it used to be only $50, they will send you an empty cycler box. So
okay, so a Next Stage
can
cycler
do that too,
because I know we get sometimes confusion about a Next Stage cycler versus a PD cycler. So a Next Stage machine can go on an airplane in the original packaging box.
right?
That's a really good tip. That I was
or
not
the
aware of
hard
that
cases.
myself. Excellent. All right. Any other questions that folks would like to ask Jane? I'm going to give you like 30 more seconds to type fast, but you can stop. There's one. A patient is traveling for 2 months. How are facilities submitting for reimbursement since they aren't getting monthly labs or being seen in the clinic? And what if the patient is out of the country? Excellent. Thank you, Janine.
Well, I don't ever want to really myself discuss reimbursement. That would be something I would say, talk with your social worker or someone about. I don't want to tell you how you get reimbursed or not reimbursed and have me give you the wrong thing. But I do know that some clinics, I mean, the guidelines, the Medicare guidelines are that you need to see a patient quarterly. I mean, everybody likes to do it monthly. So I know a lot of patients will just have them get their lab work done locally where they're at, and see them virtually. There are a lot of new options now. So I do not want to be able to say what will or will not be reimbursed correctly, though. But there are so many more options now
There's a lot more
to
telemedicine
accomplish
now.
that.
And there
Mhm.
are Quest labs everywhere. So it's actually pretty easy for somebody to go and get blood drawn. And I can't tell you about the reimbursement either. I'm sorry.
Right. And I
Uh,
do know, I mean, when some people are snowbirds and they go to Florida, they do transfer clinics for that time and then have to transfer back. And I know that's a pain in the neck, but I don't know if anything has changed in that. So I wouldn't want to say one way or the other.
I think Josh might possibly have something to say about that. All right, we're going to thank Jane for a terrific presentation. So
Right.
Josh Dubzinski is the CEO and registered nurse. He's an RN BSN for Premier Dialysis, which focuses on providing hope, near and dear to my heart, to patients on dialysis to have the least impact on their lives with a new diagnosis of ESRD. Josh started as a hemodialysis tech in 2007 in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where he went on to receive his bachelor's in nursing from Western Michigan University in 2012. After relocating to Chicago in 2013, Josh worked in hemodialysis for Fresenius and DaVita until he took a float role at US Renal Care and started managing the peritoneal dialysis programs. While running 4 home programs in the suburbs of Chicago, he was able to learn a lot about intermittent dialysis and low impact icodextrin usage. Josh moved back to Michigan in 2018 and began the process of developing physician partnerships to open a new type of dialysis company. Premier Dialysis launched in July 2020 and is the first true at-home program. Every patient is seen at home and never has to travel. We will keep our questions, answer questions at the end.
Well, I want to thank you for having me here. I mean, Dory has been so supportive since we started this adventure. We've been chit-chatting and, going back and forth on that. So I'm thankful to be invited today. To finish those numbers, we had 2 transplants within our first 6 months, which was awesome for us. And that was out of 8 patients. And we're up to 24 in our first 18 months. And a lot of that has to do with using a yes model, which is, everybody's going to be successful unless they prove you otherwise. So we give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Those that they say won't do well or they're too messy, a lot of them can give you a space that you can work with. And then, you give them a chance, and knock on wood, we don't have a lot of peritonitis or anything like that. So I just wanted to talk today. Mine is just more about being innovative and thinking through what you can do for your patients as a nurse and being confident in yourself and looking at your patients in a different way so that you can kind of holistically view how can this vacation be the best for them and still be something that's great for your company too. Because they always like that, right? And that's not what we always think with. So our mission statement as nurses should be to provide the dialysis patients access to the best, most innovative treatments that are the least invasive with the highest quality outcomes. So that's what we should be doing on a daily basis. Just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean there's not new ways to do it, right? So that's important to think about. So whenever I get a new patient, after we get through the process of teaching them, their exchanges and things of that nature, we are cycler free. So ours is manual. We like to set goals with them, and that includes travel. What would you like to do? I have one guy that just started and his son runs fishing expeditions and he wants to go to Alaska. I said, you're going to Alaska. So that's our plan. That's our 90-day goal. Get better, feel better. Let's get the anemia under control and let's start planning that trip. and then start having them plan to live their best life ever. Where do you want to go? Do you have family you haven't seen? What have you done in a while because you weren't feeling good because you were slightly uremic, and you're not used to what it's like to feel normal. What's on your bucket list? Those are the questions I'd like to go through with people for that goal setting. So if the patient wants to travel, what's the best way to help them travel while saving company money? Now, again, that's not our focus typically, but again, it never hurts because there's a balance between giving great care and also being cognizant of the bottom line on it too, and waste. So how long are they going to go? What do they need while they're there? Should you send the items yourself? Should you FedEx ground it, or should you do the 2-week lead time that Baxter or Fresenius requires to send it there? What's the cheapest shipping method? Is it ground? Is it freight a week early? And will there be a lot of waste? So if they're only going 4 days and you order a case of extra Neil, I always use that as an example. So, then they're only there 4 days. Well, you have 2 days of waste if they're on 2 liters. So how much waste are we going to have? Something to think about too, because that takes up the room in their hotel or wherever they're staying, their Airbnb. So, why should this matter to you? Well, when the company's healthy, that's coming from the other hat I wear, which is as a CEO, is, when the company's healthy, there's more that we can do for you, and when it comes to things you need, supplies, that sort of thing. And all the little stuff adds up as you go along. So, we don't usually approach it with that. It's patients first, costs later. But what if we're able to get the great care without the extra cost? So, depending on the trip, the sending supplies from Baxter is, like I mentioned, might cause a little bit of waste. So I will have an example here for you. So I had a patient went to Montana for 4 days. And, if Baxter sends mini caps, there's going to be 60 there. We're talking 4 days. You only need 8 caps. So that's quite a bit of waste there. You can send the whole case of extra Neil. And, this is contract pricing that we have $72. And then you have a case of drain bags for also $72. There's 30 bags even in the smallest set of drain bags. So again, the amount of waste is pretty heavy there. But if you're looking at it, you say, well, I saved the shipping cost. I didn't have to get a label. Well, the shipping's $14 if you do ground, depending on the size of it. Now, the weight can tend to be a little bit higher when you're doing it the extra Neil, because those are 25 pounds per case on average, 25 to 30. So in this instance, you spent $174 through the clinic on supplies. Did you give any better care? Did anything change with their outcomes or how it's going to be for the patient while they're there? And the answer is no. You did have some extra in case of waste. But typically, when it comes to PD, the reason we do it 7 days a week is because we get that little bit of flexibility, that they can have to make sure that they're doing well. So on the same token, you can say, if they're traveling for the 4 days, you can call ahead to the hotel. You can let them know you're going to send a package, just like Jane mentioned. Talk to the manager, say, hey, I have someone coming there and there's some supplies I need to send. Is it okay if I send them, and who should I put attention to? So I like to send it, like she said, 5 to 7 days ahead. A quick horror story. I did that once to California and it got stuck on a thing. So I had to overnight the next day. The patient didn't let me know right away. So it's not always rainbows and butterflies. It does happen, but that's what the lead time is for, so that you can survive those sort of moments without having to be frantic. Anyway, so, you contact the hotel, you consolidate it. So in this case, I obviously don't have a bunch of extra here, but that's what that mindset that the PD patient will probably have some decent residual and they'll be able to do well if they don't have it. But I will also mention the numbers, let's say that they do. So, you send the 8 mini caps for $4, you send 4 drain bags for 10, 4 bags of extra Neil is like $64, and then a FedEx label. That's about an $80 savings. And you can add an extra $2 for a couple more mini caps, an extra $2.50 for a drain bag. And so overall, you're still going to be around a savings of $50 to $60. And then this gets rid of not having a bunch of waste, because as we know, patients get disappointed about waste too. Like if you're having them do an urgent start or something and they're only filling up with 500 cc's, they're always like, do I have to throw this away? Like, yes, you don't reuse it. We don't reuse stuff. So it's always that mindset that they have where they could feel a little bit of guilty, whether they're Blue Care Network or Medicaid or Medicare. It's just an experience that they have, because a lot of people, especially if they don't have as much, they hate to throw stuff away. They might cling to some things. So it's also just easing their mind a little bit when you send it in addition to that savings portion. So next part I want to talk about on it is, because we're cycler free, what we're talking about is we teach them to avoid using the pole. So that's one of my people call it the pole. It sounds funny, but you know, they don't have to take their IV pole. You know, they can use the hanger on the back of the door on the bathroom. They can use the towel. You know, you're talking about gravity here, which can take about 10 minutes. So, you know, you can just have them do that. Get creative. Home's all about being creative, giving them the resources that they can do so that, you know, teaching them to not freak out if something goes a little awry. You forget your red clamps, it's okay. You could pinch it, you could tie it, or, you know, you could find something. I've used paper clips, not paper clips, but chip clips. So whatever it takes for them to get through their treatment, and then we can adapt and maybe send them what they need. So typically they can bring those little mini bottles of Alka-Vis and then some 2x2s, and, you know, one little box should be enough to get them through, say, a 4-day situation. You know, and this example, by the way, is for 4 days, but if they are going for a couple of weeks or 2 months, obviously that's a horse of a different color, and you will have Baxter send it because it just makes perfect sense. But these are, I'm really referring to as these smaller burst trips, you know, a weekend trip, a weekend getaway, something where there's not a ton of needs. And if they don't check a bag, you know, we can ship that Alka-Vis and the 2x2s as well, which are fairly cheap. You can get away with that for another $14 or so. So what if the patient uses a cycler? Okay, so these are the questions that we ask. When we have patients transfer to us that were on a cycler, we ask a couple of things, right? We all know the standard treatment, 2.5%, 12 liters, you know. So it's interesting to me is that patients go from never needing dialysis to needing 12,000. That's crazy, isn't it? It's wild how that happens. Like, where's the progression? So it's again asking that question of what is their threshold? What is their baseline BUN? What is their creatinine? What can they get along with and still be out golfing and having a good trip? You know, what can they be out working on the deck on? Do they need to have a BUN of 20 like us? I mean, that's the question you really got to beg. Does the creatinine need to be 2? So is the patient going to become uremic on this 4-day trip, you know, because they're, you know, going from a cycler over to a manual, say, extraneal for a few days, sprinkled in with a couple manual dianeals? Should the patient do their whole thing, their whole exact prescription is really what it comes down to for the whole trip. These are questions you can ask and obviously discuss with the physician, but these are the ideas and minds, the things that come to my mind when it comes to patients and travel. It's about giving them their best life, their best experience with the least amount of dialysis to get them through and to keep them safe. And that's what's most important. So again, what is the residual function? How would this reduced prescription affect them on this vacation? So when it comes to that, you know, we're talking about what if they're on, say, 8 liters a night of whatever solution, 1.5, 2.5%, and then they switch to an extraneal. Can you have some mistreatments and reduce the overall exchanges? Can you reduce that 15 liters a night and still be healthy? These things. How are their diuretics? Is it a fluid status issue or is it a UF issue? Individualizing that treatment for them and planning ahead in the weeks leading up to, you can ask those sort of questions of the doctor and say, you know, can we try to go from 80 milligram to 160, you know, for the diuretics? You know, can we do more of a European dose? How can we do this to give them the fullest enjoyment? And that's the main thing, is to constantly be working with your physicians to try to find creative approaches to make the trip easier on them so that, again, they're not spending the whole day, oh, I got to rush back to the room to do it, you know, and get this treatment going. So again, patient thresholds, that's the other main topic here. You know, matching those numbers similar to HHD or HD. You know, we have HHD patients, when they end their treatment, their BUN is 18, you know, awesome. You know, they get their KTRVs, that's great. But what can they withstand and still be safe, not uremic and asymptomatic? That's the real question on it. Can you do an extra 5 liters? Will the doctor let you do an extra couple liters before they go, you know, get that BUN down? If their threshold is, say, 60, can we get them down to 30 before they go so that they can creep a little bit, maybe say hit 70. And then when they get back, maybe we can do a catch-up session, you know, with the cycler, if they're cycler patients. Just being flexible with it and taking those samples on the patient frequently leading up to, and providing that information to the doctor so that they can make the best call. Again, so sending the icodextran is something we really believe in, and you can send that. Great for the blood sugars and also great for fluid removal. I know everyone gets really worked up about extraneal, but we use it as a first line treatment versus a last line. Of course, when you've been doing it a cycler for 2 years and you've lost that membrane permeability and you've started to lose your UF capability and your KT/Vs get lower, then when you add it, it becomes more of a prohibitive situation. And that's what I think most people focus on, is it as a last line treatment versus a first line. So something to ask about. Less phosphorus comes out with icodextran. That means, for those people, if they are on that trip, it's a binder modification probably. It's a discussion about with the dietitian to them. What can you do to modify it in a way that is still enjoying those great meals, but making sure maybe you need a little bit more there while you're adjusting it. And you can also draw the labs on that and kind of prepare. And so increasing those binders while you're there might be a great option. So, you just work with the patient to do a few days of icodextran with the doctor's orders and, see how it does their body. You can draw it on Monday, try it again on Wednesday, let's say, and then try to see how the increases are coming. And then use that information to estimate the potential toxin increase throughout the course of the week to see what might be needed. You can also add in some dianyls and do that as well. Now, I didn't really touch on the idea of a cycler. And of course, if they are just going up north, say I'm in Michigan, if they go up north Michigan, or if we're in Florida and they go there, absolutely, you can throw that cycler in there. I'm thinking more of this is geared towards flight travel, where you can ship them things, or they could even pack a few in their bags, just to be clear on that. So, cycler traveler is a completely different thing, but this was more of a focus on people that might be flying or going to another state or somewhere far enough where they're not going to drive. So, on a case-by-case basis is how we see our patients. They're individuals. They have different body types. They have different UFs. They have different membranes. They're not all created equal. Not everyone needs to start at 2.5%. And if they lived out without PUD, for so long, and then they kept going to the doctor and they were waiting off. And then all of a sudden, boom, now they need just to get hit with it. That's, it's interesting concept to think about, because either one, you waited a long time or you're doing a lot of dialysis. So that's kind of my thought on that. Travel prescriptions, though, should be part of the nursing process. Just like I mentioned, that low impact help that they need to keep them feeling good and out of the hospital. That's it. That's kind of our motto. And what do they need daily isn't necessarily what they need for a 4-day trip. So again, just work with your doctors and work with the patients and kind of see those thresholds. So in conclusion, it's just be innovative. Don't be afraid to use your knowledge as a nurse. We know that, especially in peritoneal dialysis, we have our calculators on Baxter. We have our next stage calculators. We have all those things to assist us. But sometimes those calculators and things will ask you to do more despite seeing some good results in a patient. For example, I had a patient with a phosphorus of 4 and they were doing extremely well. Their BUN was in the 30s and the prescription said to add 5 liters. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. So things of that nature, don't disregard your judgment as a nurse and bring and present things to the physician that you might think might be a good way to help your patient. With it. How can I just make them safe while not affecting their trip? So our only goals as nurses should be, as dialysis nurses, should be to help them live their lives with those least impact from their dialysis treatments. And that is it.
Thank you so much. I thought that was terrific. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but I have a couple. Actually, Jane, if you wanted to unmute, I'd actually like to ask you both the same question, which is, I would love to hear your favorite travel story. What's the one that you feel just really good about?
Well, all right. We had a patient go to Florida. She wanted to go to Florida and she wanted a kayak. So I got her a little colostomy bag to tuck it away. And I said, just don't go hardcore, just you could swim. And of course she toppled over and got submerged, but you know what? She came out okay. Nobody saw it. She had her suit on and she was able to do everything she wanted to do. And she came home without an infection. And so that was really nice to have her be pretty stoked about that and to be able to provide that.
An ostomy bag would be a good approach for kayaking. Good thought. Better than a tegaderm, I think.
Yeah.
Jane, how about you?
I've got a couple just right off the top of my head. Before, when Next Stage was still pretty new and they weren't able to support people traveling to Alaska. There was a patient from South Dakota that every year he went bear hunting in Alaska, and by God, he was going to do it. So he he took all of his supplies, took everything with him. I think he had some of it delivered close to Seattle or somewhere, and then he moved on from there. But I mean, he was truly out in the middle of nowhere. He couldn't have called anybody if he needed help. He did his treatments in his in a big truck that he his nurse was a nervous wreck the whole time he was gone. But
Did he get a bear?
loved it, and that was, oh yeah, he would get a bear, and that was, I mean, that was the whole point. I mean, it was, if something bad happened and he didn't make it home, that was fine with him. That was because he had to do that. And then another one, which also in the end made the nurses crazy, was a patient who he took his stuff and he flew to, and I can't remember exactly. I think he went to Croatia or some country that Next Stage did not support at that time, and he did not tell anybody that he was going until he got back. And he came back and he had whatever money they had in that country, and he told him what he had done.
Oh
And
my
he had,
goodness.
I mean, he had taken, and I asked him when I talked to him about it, I said, well, how many treatments did you have? Because it had to cost a lot to ship the bags of dialysate because they're heavy. And he said, well, I was on vacation. I only did 2 treatments.
Oh,
So no one knew till he got home.
For
But
how long was he gone?
he was gone for about 6 days. He was gone for a day. So he dialyzed before he went, and then traveled, had 2 treatments, and then of course he dialyzed as soon as he got home, and
Yeah.
he did fine. He did fine. And if the nurse had known ahead of time, she would have been a nervous wreck. So it was, it was one of those things that ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah.
That's the spirit I love of home patients, is that they're going to do what they need to do. It's not all about dialysis.
I do remember, just apropos of your saying how important it is to change the diet prescription, or the diet and fluids when people change their treatment frequency. I remember going to a talk, this would have been NKF of Illinois in Chicago, like probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't know, but this was Todd Ing's meeting. And the fellow who ran the nocturnal home hemo program in Chicago had a patient who was doing great on nocturnal home hemo, went to Florida on vacation, switched to standard hemo, and died of a potassium overload. I never forgot that fella, and I never ever forget to say it's very important, if you're doing less dialysis than you're used to also do less potassium than you're used to, and less fluid than you're
And fluid and salt.
Yeah, because it doesn't just land you in the hospital. That can kill you. So that's the risk. On the other hand, maybe it was worth it.
Yeah.
Maybe it was his life. So let's see, any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions. Do either of you have anything else that you want to add that maybe you forgot, or that you think would be helpful to the folks who are still here?
Just go for it. Help the patients do what they need to do, and call Next Stage and ask questions. Don't hesitate.
You are also a say yes kind of person. Okay, and Josh?
I was gonna go back to that question, because we have our snowbirds too. I would recommend, though, when you have that question about, the patient who travels, I send them with labs. I get their labs drawn. I make sure I'm monitoring them. We still do all of our virtual meetings. So I contact them. I make sure they're doing well. In our case, I hired a nurse where they're located, and we have a physician in that area who wrote the orders, so that we still had that aspect of it. So if they need some iron or Mircera or anything like that, they can also do their home administration. I just made sure to update their address and everything for where they're going for the time being.
Terrific. All right. Well, I would like to thank both of you again. For those of you who put your email addresses into the chat to get Jane's handout, I've got all of those. So we will get those out to you possibly yet today, because we still have some time left in the day. And you will also get notified when the CE credits are available, in case you're interested in those, and share that link once you get it. Other people can listen and take the quiz and get CE credits as well. And I think these days the online CE credits, probably more of them will be accepted than used to be, because we are in some strange times where We're just now finally starting to get back to going to conferences, which is really, really nice. And I know I'm looking forward to it. So have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and everyone take care.
Yep. And you can
Thank
get,
you.
I say, asking for the contact info, they can have mine. It's josh@premier-dialysis.com. And I'm open for all questions and things. And
Excellent.
we're in Florida now and Michigan and coming to Tennessee. So I'll be around soon, I promise. So I'll see you all.
You guys are growing fast. Very cool. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.